Social intelligence. Learn to read, understand, and connect with people. Introduction. Why social intelligence is the key to human success. We live in an era where technical knowledge, academic degrees, and digital skills seem to dominate the conversation about success. However, behind every great personal achievement, every meaningful relationship, and every ascending career lies a more subtle, more human, and much more powerful force. Social intelligence. This ability, often invisible but deeply influential, allows us to read the emotions of others, adapt to different social contexts, generate trust, resolve conflicts, and genuinely connect with those around us. It is not about pleasing everyone or manipulating others, but about understanding the invisible fabric that binds people together, the emotional language underlying every human interaction. Social intelligence is not the same as intellectual intelligence. Having a high IQ may help you solve complex equations, analyze data, and learn quickly, but it does not guarantee that you can lead a team, maintain a loving relationship, or inspire others. Many of the greatest mistakes, misunderstandings, and failures in our lives do not come from a lack of knowledge, but from a lack of social understanding. People with high IQs but poor social intelligence often find limits in their growth, both personal and professional, because they do not know how to navigate their own emotions or those of others. On the other hand, individuals with average intelligence but high social sensitivity are able to open doors, build bridges, and stand strong even in challenging environments. So, what exactly is social intelligence? It is the ability to understand the emotions, motivations, and behaviors of others in different social contexts. It is knowing when to speak and when to remain silent, when to approach and when to step back, how to interpret a glance, a pause, a smile, or a silence. It is the art of reading between the lines, of feeling what others feel without them saying it, and of responding with tact, empathy, and clarity. It is not an innate trait but a skill that can be trained, strengthened through experience, reflection, and above all, the intention to improve the quality of our relationships. In today's world, where technology has shortened physical distances but created new forms of emotional disconnection, social intelligence becomes a key differentiator. Companies no longer only seek employees with technical skills but professionals capable of working in teams, inspiring others, resolving tensions, and maintaining a positive emotional climate. Personal relationships, in turn, require increasing skills in listening, understanding, and communication to survive in the midst of busy schedules and changing expectations. And in all of this, social intelligence emerges as a bridge between knowledge and connection, between doing and being, between visible success and invisible well-being. This audiobook has been created with one clear objective: to help you develop deep, practical, and transformative social intelligence. Throughout this audiobook, we will explore how to better understand people, interpret what is not said, manage your own emotions in social situations, and become someone who connects authentically and leaves a lasting impression in every interaction. You will learn to detect nonverbal signals, build solid relationships, handle difficult conversations, and cultivate a social presence that inspires respect, warmth, and cooperation. This is not just another audiobook about social skills. It is a guide to transform how you relate to the world. It does not matter whether you are introverted or extroverted, whether you are comfortable speaking in public or prefer one-on-one interactions, whether you work with teams or alone, or whether you have a large social network or find it hard to connect with others. Social intelligence does not depend on your personality but on your willingness to observe, learn, and practice. And that is exactly what we will do here. As we embark on this journey, I invite you to keep an open mind and a willing heart. Every idea, every technique, and every story you will hear is designed to help you get closer to a better version of yourself. A version that is more aware, more empathetic, and more skilled at living and building alongside others. In an increasingly complex world, people who know how to read and respond intelligently to others' emotions do not just survive, they thrive. They are the ones who inspire, lead, unite, and transform. They are the ones who leave a mark. So take a deep breath, open your ears wide, and get ready. You are about to begin a journey that, if you allow it, can change not only how you relate to others but also how you understand yourself. Because understanding others always starts with looking within. And social intelligence, more than a technique, is a way of living with more presence, more sensitivity, and more connection. Let's begin. But before we continue, tell us from which city you are listening, and if this message resonates with you, subscribe to the channel now. This way, You won't miss any content that nourishes your mind and brings you closer each day to the life you truly deserve. There's no time to waste. Now let's continue. Chapter 1. The Social Brain, How We Are Wired to Connect. From the moment we are born, our brain begins to register the world not only through our senses but also through the emotions that surround us. It is no coincidence that a baby responds to another baby's cry or smiles when a nearby face smiles. This ability to connect, to emotionally respond to what happens in others, is written into our most primitive neurological code. We don't learn to be social in the same way we learn to read or drive. We are born with a biological predisposition to connect with others. The human brain is, by nature, a social organ. It is designed to perceive, process, and respond to social signals from the earliest days of life. Before we even know how to speak, we already know how to imitate, how to feel what others feel, and how to sense the emotional atmosphere of an environment. One of the most fascinating keys to this biological predisposition is the discovery of so-called mirror neurons. These neurons, first identified in studies with primates, fire not only when we perform an action but also when we see someone else performing it. In other words, if you see someone smile, your brain activates the same areas that would activate if you were smiling yourself. The same thing happens with gestures, movements, and even emotions. Mirror neurons allow us to internally experience what others are externally feeling. They are the neurological foundation of automatic empathy, that almost instinctive ability to resonate with another person's emotional state without the need for words. Thanks to these neurons, we can feel tension in a room without anyone saying a word. We can sense if someone is sad, even if they try to hide it. We can share another person's joy just by seeing their expression. This explains why emotions are so contagious. All it takes is one person in a group to display irritation or enthusiasm, and everyone else unconsciously adapts to that tone. This emotional connection is not an act of logic. It is a reflex, a nervous system response that helps us survive in society. For thousands of years, our survival depended not only on our physical abilities but also on our capacity to read and appropriately respond to other members of the tribe. The interesting thing about this phenomenon is that it does not require conscious effort. When you see someone injured, your face may tense up. When someone laughs genuinely, you probably smile too. You don't decide to do it. It just happens. And this is where social intelligence comes into play. In becoming aware of these automatic processes and learning to interpret them accurately. Because while biological empathy is automatic, developing it as a social tool requires attention, practice, and refinement. We may be born with the ability to resonate with others, but turning that ability into a useful skill depends on what we do with it. Beyond mirror neurons, there are other brain systems involved in human connection. One of them is the limbic system, which regulates our emotions and interprets the emotions of others. This system, deeply ancient in evolutionary terms, acts faster than the rational part of the brain. This is why we often feel something in the air before we can explain it. The limbic system alerts us when something feels off, when a look is threatening, or when a voice conveys tenderness. It guides us in emotionally interpreting our environment before we can process it intellectually. And yet, in modern life, we have become disconnected from this instinctive wisdom. We take refuge in screens, routines, and abstract thoughts, often neglecting to pay attention to the signals our bodies and brains are constantly processing. Regaining that sensitivity is one of the great benefits of training in social intelligence. It is about relearning how to listen not just to what is said, but also to what is felt, what is shown without words, what vibrates in tone of voice, in gestures, in silences. Because it is there that the deepest bonds are forged. Understanding how we are wired to connect also helps us understand why social isolation is so painful. From a biological perspective, disconnection is not only uncomfortable, it is perceived as a threat. Social rejection activates the same regions in the brain that activate during physical pain. In other words, feeling excluded hurts as much as a wound. This is why cultivating healthy, authentic, and empathetic relationships is not an emotional luxury but a neurophysiological necessity. We need to feel seen, understood, accepted. And that need is universal, regardless of culture, gender, or age. In this first step of our journey toward refined social intelligence, it is essential to recognize that we are not alone in our search for connection. All of us, to varying degrees, long to belong, to be heard, to be respected. And within each of us lies the biological potential to create those bonds. As we move forward, you will learn not only to identify other social signals but also to become more aware of how your own signals affect those around you. Because connection starts with oneself but reflects and expands in every glance, every gesture, every shared word. Social intelligence, therefore, is not simply a set of techniques to please or persuade. It is a profound acknowledgement of our shared humanity. It is the art of honoring that natural wiring that drives us to seek others out, to understand them, to accompany them. And although this capacity is imprinted in our brain, it can also be strengthened like a muscle. The more we use it intentionally, the greater its impact. With this knowledge in mind, you are now ready to start observing the world through a new lens. The social brain, that wonderful evolutionary tool that reminds us that, at our core, we are made to connect. Chapter 2. Reading People. Keys to Interpreting Body Language and Emotions. Understanding people is not just about listening to their words. In fact, most of what human beings truly communicate happens beyond verbal language. Gestures, postures, eye contact, tone of voice, and even pauses or silences often reveal far more than what someone is willing to admit with words. Reading people is, therefore, an art that requires attention, sensitivity, and training. In this chapter, we dive into the essential keys to developing this ability to interpret body language and the emotions hidden behind the facade of what is spoken. Micro-expressions, for example, are one of the most revealing and, at the same time, subtle phenomena in human communication. These are involuntary facial movements that last only a fraction of a second, yet clearly reveal genuine emotion. They can be expressions of anger, sadness, surprise, contempt, or joy that escape before the person can filter or control them. They are almost instant responses from the emotional brain before the rational mind intervenes. Detecting them takes practice, but once you sharpen your eye, it opens a powerful window into the inner world of others. Another key indicator is body posture. The way someone sits, stands, or moves reflects much more than it may seem. A closed body, with crossed arms, hunched shoulders, or a lowered gaze, may indicate insecurity, distrust, or emotional defense. In contrast, an open posture, with the chest forward, shoulders relaxed, and firm eye contact, often reflects confidence, willingness to engage in dialogue, and emotional openness. The goal is not to make quick judgments but to interpret the congruence between what is being said and what the body is expressing. When there is a contradiction between the two, the body is usually more honest. Tone of voice also reveals intentions, emotions, and levels of sincerity. A tense voice with a fast rhythm may show anxiety or evasiveness. A very low volume may indicate shyness or discomfort. A firm voice with natural pauses can signal confidence and emotional clarity. Furthermore, changes in tone can help detect key moments. A slight tremble when pronouncing certain words, a downward inflection when talking about a painful subject, or a sudden increase in volume may be signs that a significant emotion is being touched. And here lies one of the most delicate and fascinating aspects of social intelligence: the ability to detect hidden emotions. Not everyone expresses what they feel openly. For cultural, educational, or personal reasons, many have learned to hide what is truly going on inside them. They may say they are fine while their gaze shifts away, or claim they are not angry while their fists unconsciously tighten. The ability to see beyond words is what makes the difference between superficial communication and deep connection. Detecting hidden emotions does not mean confronting the other person or assuming you know more than they are willing to share. Rather, it is about cultivating empathetic sensitivity that allows you to read subtle signals without invading, without forcing, but simply being present with full attention. Many times, simply showing that you are available is enough for the other person to open up. And that availability is conveyed not through elaborate phrases but through presence, active listening, and respect for the other person's emotional rhythm. To refine this ability, it is essential to learn how to observe without judging. Observe with curiosity, with a genuine interest in understanding what the other is communicating through their body, face, and energy. It is a training of perception that requires shifting the focus from yourself to the experience of the other. It also requires humility, because it means recognizing that what you see is not always what you understand at first glance. Body language, like any language, needs to be learned and contextualized. There are no universal gestures that always mean the same thing. Each person has their own way of expressing themselves, shaped by their history, culture, and emotional state. As you develop this sensitivity, you also become more aware of your own nonverbal signals. You start to notice how your expression changes when you are tense, how your voice shifts according to your mood, and how your body reacts to certain people or topics. This self-awareness is as valuable as the ability to read others, because it allows you to adjust your presence to generate more clarity, trust, and harmony in your interactions. Reading people, ultimately, is an act of active empathy. It is telling the other person, without words, "I see you. I hear you. I care about what you are feeling, even if you are not saying it." It is about building invisible bridges between emotions, about understanding without long explanations. And when someone feels understood at that level, a subtle but powerful transformation occurs. Distrust dissolves, the possibility of authentic dialogue opens up, and the human bond is strengthened. In daily life, this skill translates into better decisions, healthier relationships, and a greater ability to positively influence others. Whether in a conversation with a friend, a work meeting, a family conflict, or a casual encounter, reading people allows you to respond from a more conscious and humane place. And in a world where emotional disconnection seems to be increasing, this is an invaluable advantage. The power of social intelligence lies in this ability to interpret what is beyond the obvious, to connect with the invisible but ever-present signals in every gesture. It is not about having magical powers or manipulating anyone. It is about opening your eyes, mind, and heart to see others more deeply. And in doing so, you also discover new ways of seeing yourself. Because every glance, every gesture you interpret also reflects and transforms you. This is how the art of authentic connection is built. Chapter 3. Active Listening, the Superpower of Great Connectors. In a world saturated with noise, constant information, and rushed conversations, true listening has become an endangered art. Many people believe they are listening when, in reality, they are only waiting for their turn to speak. The difference between hearing and listening is vast, and in the context of social intelligence, it is a distinction that determines the quality and depth of our relationships. Hearing is a passive process. Listening, on the other hand, is a deliberate act of attention, presence, and genuine interest in another person. Active listening is, without a doubt, one of the superpowers of great connectors, a tool that transforms any superficial conversation into a bridge toward mutual understanding. When someone feels truly heard, something inside them relaxes. Their guard comes down. They open up. Because authentic listening does not only capture words, it captures emotions, silences, nuances. Listening actively means being there with all your senses, without distractions, without judgment, without the constant need to have a ready response. It is telling the other person, without interruptions or premature advice, that their experience is valid and that what they feel matters. This kind of listening is rare, which is why when someone experiences it, it feels like a rare and precious gift. To develop this skill, the first step is training attention. We live in an era in which attention is fragmented by multiple stimuli: notifications, thoughts, worries, screens. Active listening requires silencing that internal noise, at least for a moment, and turning fully toward the other person. This means looking into their eyes, observing body language, noting tone of voice, and above all, pausing the impulse to respond quickly. A significant part of empathetic listening consists of being comfortable with silences, allowing the other person to finish processing what they are saying without feeling pressured to fill empty spaces. Another fundamental technique of empathetic listening is emotional validation. It is not about agreeing with everything the other person says, but about recognizing their emotion as legitimate. Saying things like, "I understand why that hurt you," or "I can imagine how frustrating that must be for you," creates an atmosphere of emotional safety. Validating is not justifying, minimizing, or correcting. It is simply accepting that what the other feels is real for them and deserves to be acknowledged. This simple action has the power to lower defenses, ease tension, and strengthen the emotional bond. In addition, active listening involves reflecting, paraphrasing, and confirming what we have understood. Phrases like, "If I understand you correctly, what you're saying is," or "What I'm hearing is that you feel," help ensure we are correctly capturing the message. This type of feedback not only clarifies but also shows the other person that we are truly present, engaged, and willing to understand deeply. Through this reflection, a sense of alliance is built, a genuine connection where both parties feel emotionally aligned. A common trap when trying to listen is falling into premature problem solving. Often, when someone shares a concern, our instinct is to offer advice, solutions, and paths forward. But many times, what the other person needs is not a solution but space to be heard. Simply verbalizing what they feel already helps them organize their inner experience. Offering a quick solution can cause the person to shut down, feeling that they were not fully understood. That is why one of the keys to active listening is to hold space rather than rush to fix things. To sustain the emotional space without hurrying, without changing it, and without interrupting it. Empathetic listening also requires self-awareness. It is important to pay attention to our own judgments, reactions, and emotions during a conversation. Sometimes, what the other says may resonate with our own wounds or trigger automatic responses. In those moments, the challenge is to avoid being carried away by reactivity, to return to the present, to remember that we are there to accompany, not to project. Listening involves momentarily emptying yourself of yourself to make space for the other. It is an act of humility, of surrender, and of profound respect. Applied to everyday life, this skill radically transforms relationships. At work, it generates more cohesive and collaborative teams. In families, it strengthens trust and understanding. In friendships, it deepens bonds and allows difficult conversations to be handled with mutual care. Even in brief or casual interactions, active listening has a powerful impact. Because everyone, on some level, longs to be heard, seen, and understood. And when someone offers that to us, even for a moment, we feel less alone in the world. Being a great connector does not require having all the answers or speaking eloquently. Often, true emotional leaders are those who know how to listen, who provide space, who become a safe haven. And that quality does not depend on innate talent but on a conscious decision. The decision to be present, to open up to others, to accompany without invading. Active listening is, therefore, a form of love in action. It is offering time, attention, and presence as a generous and transformative act. By cultivating this superpower, we not only improve our external relationships but also train ourselves to listen more deeply to ourselves. Because the same level of attention and empathy we offer others can be applied to our own emotions, thoughts, and needs. Thus, active listening becomes a practice that expands our awareness, enriches our interactions, and brings us closer to a fuller, more connected, and more human life. Chapter 4. Cognitive Empathy versus Emotional Empathy. Empathy is one of the central pillars of social intelligence, and although the term is frequently used, it is often not fully understood in all its complexity. We tend to think of empathy as the ability to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, but this skill has profound nuances that must be explored in order to develop truly meaningful connections with others. There are two main types of empathy, cognitive and emotional. Both are valuable, both have different applications, and both can be cultivated with awareness. Understanding the difference between knowing what another person is experiencing and actually feeling it yourself is key to relating with sensitivity, without falling into emotional exhaustion or rational disconnection. Cognitive empathy is the ability to rationally understand what another person is experiencing. In other words, putting yourself in their place with your mind, not necessarily your heart. It involves recognizing another person's emotions, understanding why they feel a certain way, and anticipating how they might react based on what they are experiencing. This form of empathy is useful in contexts where we need to make objective decisions without being swept away emotionally. For example, a doctor who understands a patient's suffering but needs to maintain mental clarity to give the best diagnosis, or a leader who recognizes their team's frustration but must stay focused to make strategic decisions. Emotional empathy, on the other hand, is feeling in your body and heart what the other person is feeling. It is emotionally resonating with someone else's experience, experiencing a kind of emotional contagion that connects us immediately and deeply. This form of empathy generates compassion, tenderness, spontaneous solidarity. When we see someone cry and feel a lump in our throat, when a story moves us to tears, when another person's pain becomes our own, even for an instant, we are experiencing emotional empathy. It is the kind of connection that breaks down the barriers of the ego and reminds us that, at our core, we all share the same human emotions. Knowing how to activate one type of empathy or the other depending on the situation is part of emotional maturity. There are moments when we need emotional empathy to generate closeness, deep understanding, and human warmth. For example, when a friend is going through a loss, when a child needs comfort, or when someone feels lonely and simply needs us to be present from the heart. In those cases, it is not about giving explanations or solutions, but about feeling with the other person, offering presence, holding space without words. But there are also moments when, if we let emotional empathy take over, we can collapse or make ineffective decisions. That is when cognitive empathy becomes essential. For example, in helping professions like psychology, medicine, education, or social work, those who accompany people in pain cannot allow themselves to absorb all that suffering unfiltered because it would quickly lead to burnout or paralysis. In such contexts, understanding with the mind what the other person is going through, while not losing human connection but maintaining some internal distance, allows for more effective help and less personal exhaustion. In everyday life, both types of empathy coexist and complement each other. Knowing when to open your heart and when to cool down your mind is a subtle dance, a conscious decision refined through experience. There is no exact formula, but there are signals. If you feel that someone else's emotion overwhelms you to the point where you cannot think clearly, it is time to activate more cognitive empathy. If, on the other hand, you notice that you are understanding rationally but the other person does not feel understood, you may need to open yourself more to the emotional dimension. The key is to develop flexible sensitivity. People with high social intelligence do not remain stuck in one form of empathy. They adapt their emotional response to what the situation and the person need. Sometimes that means lowering your defenses and feeling with vulnerability. Other times, it means staying firm so the other person doesn't completely fall apart. Both responses can be equally loving, equally valid, equally human. Training these two forms of empathy involves paying attention to our own internal states, observing how our body reacts to the emotions of others, how we interpret the signals we receive, how we relate to our own pain. Because the more aware we are of our own emotions, the more capacity we have to connect with others' emotions without losing our center. Empathy begins at home. If we deny or fail to understand our own emotions, it is unlikely we can offer authentic empathy to others. Furthermore, activating empathy does not always mean agreeing with someone else. We can understand their perspective and emotion without sharing or justifying it. Empathy is not complicity, approval, or surrender. It is simply connection. It is being able to say, I understand how you feel, even if I don't feel the same, or I can see where your emotion comes from, even if I don't agree with your actions. This distinction is especially important in contexts of conflict or disagreement, where cognitive empathy allows respect and understanding without falling into condescension or emotional fusion. Developing these abilities not only improves our relationships but also makes us more human. In an increasingly polarized world, where opinions tend to clash instead of engage in dialogue, empathy, in all its forms, becomes an antidote to indifference, hasty judgment, and dehumanization. Understanding without justifying, feeling without collapsing, accompanying without absorbing. That is the formula for mature, sensitive, and effective emotional intelligence. Learning to distinguish between cognitive and emotional empathy is not a theoretical exercise. It is a daily practice, a constant decision to be present with awareness, to see others as mirrors of our own vulnerability. It is the ability to choose how to respond instead of automatically reacting. And in doing so, we become not only better communicators but also better human beings. Because every time we understand or feel with another person, even in the midst of our differences, we are weaving the invisible web of what makes us profoundly equal. Chapter 5. Emotional Intelligence Applied to Social Settings. Emotional intelligence is much more than recognizing our emotions. It is, above all, knowing how to manage them wisely, especially when we are interacting with others. In the realm of social intelligence, this ability becomes a key tool for creating healthy, authentic, and sustainable relationships. The way we handle our emotional world profoundly influences how we communicate, how we are perceived, and how we emotionally impact those around us. It is not just about what we feel, but about what we transmit. And often, the emotional state of one single person has the power to alter, positively or negatively, the entire climate of a group or a relationship. Emotional self-regulation is the art of maintaining internal balance in the midst of social interactions. It is the ability to recognize an intense emotion, such as anger, frustration, fear, or sadness, and consciously choose how to express it, when to express it, or even whether it is necessary to express it at that moment. It is not about repressing emotions but managing them intelligently so as not to act impulsively or damage our relationships. An emotionally intelligent person is not one who never gets angry, but one who can feel anger and still choose to speak clearly instead of shouting. It is someone who feels anxiety but does not automatically unload it on others. It is someone who realizes that an emotion does not have to become an automatic reaction. In social interactions, this self-regulation becomes essential because our emotions are contagious. The phenomenon of emotional contagion is well documented. It only takes one person entering a space with a negative or tense attitude for the entire atmosphere to be affected. The same happens in reverse. One person who transmits calm, joy, or enthusiasm can elevate the emotional state of an entire group. We are profoundly social beings and, therefore, emotionally interdependent. What we feel, express, and project has a real effect on those around us. This is why cultivating emotional self-regulation is not only a personal responsibility but also a form of collective care. Imagine a team leader facing an unexpected setback. If that leader is swept away by anxiety and begins expressing frustration without a filter, the entire team will absorb it. Tension, fear, and doubt will spread. However, if that same leader acknowledges their stress but decides to breathe, focus, and speak from a place of calm, the team will feel contained, motivated, and focused. The result depends not so much on the problem itself, but on how it is emotionally managed. The same applies to family, friendships, or romantic relationships. The way we regulate our emotions determines the quality of our responses, the depth of our bonds, and the emotional health of the environments we share. The key lies in developing active emotional awareness. Before reacting, pause for a moment and ask, what exactly am I feeling? Where is this emotion coming from? Is it proportional to the current situation, or is it colored by past experiences? How do I want to respond? What impact will my reaction have on the other person? This pause, even if only for a few seconds, is where emotional intelligence lives. It is the interval between stimulus and response where our freedom and power of choice reside. At first, it may feel artificial, but with practice, it becomes a natural habit, a clearer and more compassionate way of living. Beyond this conscious pause, there are specific techniques to self-regulate emotions in social situations. Deep breathing is one of the most effective. A few seconds of controlled breathing can significantly reduce the intensity of an emotion. Another technique is shifting your mental focus. Instead of obsessing over what annoys you about the other person, you can ask yourself what that person is feeling, what need is unmet. This empathetic perspective dissolves reactivity and allows us to act from understanding rather than defensiveness. It is also helpful to have anchoring phrases, internal reminders such as, I can choose how to respond, or my emotion is valid, but it does not have to control me. Developing this skill also helps us better read other people's emotions. When we are emotionally regulated, we have more internal space to observe others without filters or projections. We can see beyond the words, pick up on what is truly happening, and offer support without taking on what does not belong to us. It is as if by calming our own waters, we can more clearly see the emotional surface of others. This combination of self-regulation and empathetic observation is what allows emotionally intelligent people to connect deeply without losing their center. Another important aspect is recognizing how our emotional state affects our communication. When we are tense, we tend to interpret other people's messages defensively. A simple comment can feel like criticism, a pause can sound like disapproval, a gesture can be misinterpreted. On the other hand, when we are calm and balanced, our perception widens. We are more capable of listening openly, responding kindly, and disagreeing without attacking. This is why regulating our emotions not only improves how we feel but also how we are understood and how we relate to others. It is also important to remember that emotional self-regulation does not mean becoming hardened or disconnected. On the contrary, it is about being more sensitive and more human, but from a place of emotional responsibility. It means knowing that what we feel is legitimate, but that not everything we feel needs to be expressed immediately or in any manner. It allows us to be vulnerable without being impulsive, expressive without being hurtful, authentic without being chaotic. It is the foundation upon which we can build relationships based on trust, transparency, and mutual respect. The constant practice of emotional intelligence in our social interactions transforms not only our relationships but also our quality of life. It frees us from emotional automatism, allows us to choose who we want to be in every encounter, and gives us the power to positively influence others without needing to control or impose. It turns us into people who uplift, who inspire, who support. And in a world increasingly full of reactivity, such people are a beacon of clarity and humanity. Being aware of how our emotions affect others is not a burden. It is an opportunity to lead by example, to build more authentic connections, and to contribute to a more emotionally healthy and conscious environment. Chapter 6. Difficult Conversations. How to say what you think without losing the relationship. Difficult conversations are an inevitable part of social life. These are the moments when we feel the need to express something important, uncomfortable, or delicate, while at the same time fearing the consequences it might have on the relationship. Whether it's about setting a boundary, giving feedback, expressing disagreement, or communicating a deep need, we often find ourselves trapped between the desire to be honest and the fear of hurting someone, being misunderstood, or triggering conflict. However, people with high social intelligence know that the key is not to avoid these moments, but to learn how to handle them with assertiveness, respect, and empathy. Assertive communication is the bridge between passive silence born of fear and aggressive imposition by force. It is the ability to say what we think and feel with clarity, without trampling others or submitting ourselves. In a difficult conversation, assertiveness allows us to remain firm in our message while remaining open to the other person. It's not about being right or winning an argument. It's about creating a space where both parties can be heard, understood, and respected, even in disagreement. Assertiveness arises from self-respect and respect for others. Someone who communicates from this place is not seeking to attack or defend, but to connect through truth and constructive intention. One of the most effective tools in these situations is the use of first-person messages. Instead of pointing fingers with phrases like, "You always do this," or "You never listen to me," it is far more effective to express how we feel and what we need. For example, "I feel frustrated when I'm not listened to because I need to feel acknowledged," generates less resistance and more openness than a direct accusation. First-person messages make the speaker responsible for their own emotions without blaming the other person, creating a more fertile ground for dialogue. Another important technique is the art of validating the other person, even when we don't agree. Validation doesn't necessarily mean agreeing, but rather acknowledging that the other person has the right to feel or think the way they do. Phrases like, "I understand that this is important to you," or "I can see that this bothers you," open the door to a more humane conversation. Validation does not weaken our position. On the contrary, it strengthens the bond by showing that we can stand by our views without disqualifying those of the other person. In difficult conversations, it is also crucial to regulate our tone of voice, facial expression, and body language. Many times, what we say takes a back seat to how our body transmits tension, aggression, or disdain. The alignment between verbal and nonverbal communication conveys authenticity and reduces the risk of misunderstanding. A calm voice, an open posture, and an empathetic gaze can soften even the firmest messages. Because what we say matters, but how we say it often matters even more. Handling criticism is another delicate area in social communication. When we receive criticism, our first impulse is often to defend ourselves, justify our actions, or strike back. However, an emotional reaction can escalate the conflict and close us off from potential growth. A person with social intelligence learns to listen to criticism with curiosity, asking, "Is there any truth in this? What can I learn?" This doesn't mean accepting everything we're told without discernment, but rather distinguishing between constructive criticism, intended to improve something, and destructive criticism, intended only to hurt. Knowing how to make this distinction gives us the power to choose what to take in and what to let go. When offering criticism, it is also important to take care of our approach. Instead of focusing on what is wrong, we can speak in terms of improvement, possibilities, and impact. Changing "you're doing this wrong" to "I think you could get better results if you consider this approach" makes a huge difference in the other person's receptiveness. It is also valuable to balance criticism with recognition, showing that we see the whole picture, not just the mistake. Saying something like, "I really value your effort, and I think if you adjust this you'll achieve even more," generates openness and trust. In disagreements, the key is to remember that disagreeing doesn't mean disconnecting. We can disagree with someone and still maintain the relationship. Social intelligence teaches us that the goal of a difficult conversation is not to impose one perspective, but to understand and be understood. Sometimes simply getting the other person to understand how we feel is already a huge step forward. Even when an immediate solution is not reached, the very act of being able to talk without harming each other transforms the relationship. Every difficult conversation that is handled with respect and clarity strengthens the fabric of trust. It's also useful to prepare emotionally and mentally before a challenging conversation. Anticipating possible reactions, clarifying the message we want to convey, and connecting with our deeper intention allows us to enter the situation with greater calm and clarity. Sometimes, just doing this pre-work already reduces the emotional load and increases our chances of success. And if, in the middle of the conversation, emotions rise, we can take a pause, breathe, and resume from a more centered place. It's not about doing it perfectly, but about being present, committed, and available for truth. Ultimately, difficult conversations are not obstacles to avoid but opportunities to grow, to heal, to set boundaries, and to deepen connection. They confront us with our vulnerability but also give us the chance to show courage, honesty, and respect. Each time we face one of these situations with social intelligence, we stop fearing conflict and begin to see it as a doorway to more authentic relationships. Because speaking from the heart, without abandoning our truth or our humanity, is one of the most powerful ways to transform the world we share. Chapter 7. Creating Genuine Connections Beyond Superficiality. In an increasingly fast-paced and digitalized world, where superficial interactions have become the norm and social masks abound, the deep desire for genuine connection remains intact. People long to feel seen, understood, and accepted as they truly are, without judgment or filters. However, what we often experience in our daily relationships is empty politeness, partial presence, or conversations that skim the surface without touching what truly matters. Social intelligence invites us to go beyond that superficiality and build real bonds through two fundamental ingredients: authenticity and vulnerability. Authenticity is the sincere expression of who we are in each moment. It means showing up without masks, without pretensions, and without trying to fit into someone else's mold. Being authentic does not mean saying everything we think without filters, but rather acting in coherence with our values, emotions, and thoughts. When we are authentic, our words carry weight, our presence conveys truth, and our energy inspires trust. Authentic people are not seeking to impress, they simply allow themselves to be. And it is precisely that inner coherence that generates magnetism and connection, because it invites others to do the same, to lower their defenses and show themselves from their essence. But authenticity cannot exist without vulnerability. Vulnerability is the act of opening ourselves emotionally, of sharing how we truly feel, even when it makes us feel exposed or insecure. In a culture that often values perfection, self-sufficiency, and control, showing vulnerability can seem like a weakness. Yet it is quite the opposite. Only truly strong people can say, "This hurts," "I don't know," "I need help," or "This matters to me." Vulnerability is the bridge that unites hearts. When someone dares to show themselves as they are, without masks or armor, they give others permission to do the same. This is how deep trust spaces are created, where relationships can truly flourish. Building trust quickly does not depend so much on how long we have known someone, but on the quality of presence we offer. You can know someone for years and still feel there is no real bond, or have a one-hour conversation and feel you have connected deeply. What makes the difference? Openness. Mindful attention. The courage to say something authentic. The ability to truly listen. Trust is born when the other person perceives that we are not judging them, that we have no hidden agenda, and that our words and actions are congruent. This is why every time we act with integrity, respect, and full presence, we are sowing trust. A powerful strategy for building connection is sharing something personal gradually and sensitively. This is called progressive self-disclosure. It's not about telling all our secrets at once, but rather offering small windows into our inner world. Sharing a meaningful anecdote, a recent emotion, an experience that marked us. These revelations create closeness because they humanize us. They take us out of the role, out of the character, out of the formalities, and turn us into real people. Of course, this requires sensitivity to gauge how much to share depending on the context and the other person's receptiveness. But in general, when someone dares to show an authentic part of themselves, it creates a mirror effect. The other person feels permission to open up as well. Another essential aspect of building trust is consistency between what we say and what we do. Words build, but actions confirm. If we say we value honesty but hide important information, trust is broken. If we promise to be present but our attention is divided, the other person senses it. Conversely, when our words are backed by our actions, we convey safety. People trust those who are emotionally predictable, who act with integrity, who keep their word. Active listening also plays a central role in creating authentic connections. Listening with full attention, without interrupting, without preparing our response while the other is speaking, is an act of love. Listening not only to what is said but how it is said. Paying attention to the emotions behind the words. Validating, reflecting, asking genuine questions. All of this communicates, I'm with you, you matter to me, your inner world is valuable to me. And when someone feels truly heard, they relax, open up, and trust. It is also important to let go of the need to impress. Often, in our attempt to please or stand out, we fall into the trap of exaggerating, competing, or pretending. But that only creates distance. True connection comes from humility, not from showing off. People are not moved by our perfection but by our humanity. Showing our doubts, sharing our lessons, speaking from the heart, this touches deep chords. Social intelligence teaches us that connection is not forced or manipulated. It is cultivated through emotional honesty. We must remember that every interaction is an opportunity to deepen a bond. A greeting can be more than a formality if it is accompanied by a warm look. How are you? Can open a meaningful conversation if asked with genuine curiosity. A pause to listen can be more transformative than 1,000 pieces of advice. And a sincere gesture, such as a word of encouragement or an act of kindness, can remain in someone's emotional memory for a long time. In a world thirsty for authenticity, every authentic gesture is a seed of connection. Building deep relationships is not a matter of luck, it is a conscious choice. It is the result of deciding to show ourselves as we are, honoring our emotions, listening with presence, and acting with integrity. It's not about being perfect, but about being real. Because at the end of the day, what we all long for is not the company of flawless people but the closeness of human beings willing to share their truth. That is the magic of social intelligence. It reminds us that the most powerful connection happens when we dare to be ourselves. Chapter 8. Positive Influence. How to be someone who lifts others up. Influence is one of the most visible manifestations of social intelligence. But not all influence is the same. There are forms of influence that arise from fear, manipulation, or self-interest, and others that emerge from respect, inspiration, and a genuine desire to contribute. True positive influence does not seek to dominate or convince by force, but rather to inspire through example, coherence, and a presence that uplifts those around us. Being a positive influence in others' lives does not require overwhelming charisma or positions of power. It requires awareness, empathy, and commitment to collective well-being. It requires being intentional in the way we speak, act, and connect. Social leadership is precisely this: the ability to guide others through human connection, not hierarchical control. There are people who lead without titles because their presence brings clarity, direction, and motivation to others. This kind of leadership is born from respect, not fear, from listening, not commanding. Those who practice this form of leadership are people who can read the emotions of the group, detect tensions before they explode, celebrate the successes of others, and know when to speak and when to simply hold space in silence. Leading through social intelligence means serving, not standing above others. The styles of social leadership are varied, but they all share a common root: human sensitivity. There are leaders who inspire with a clear and passionate vision, spreading enthusiasm and giving meaning to collective effort. There are those who lead through calmness and deep listening, becoming the point of balance amid chaos. There are also those who lead by silent example, through daily consistency, without the need for grand speeches. Each one influences in their own way, but they all make an impact because they understand that their behavior resonates with others. They don't wait to be followed. They act as if they are already role models. To positively influence others, it is essential to abandon all forms of manipulation. Manipulation seeks control through emotional deception, guilt, blackmail, or self-serving seduction. While it can generate immediate results, in the long run, it destroys trust and erodes relationships. Positive influence, on the other hand, is based on transparency. It means saying what we truly feel, asking for what we need with respect, giving without expecting something in return, and holding our ground with dignity when others don't respond as we wish. This kind of influence does not pressure or persuade with hidden strategies, but instead opens paths through authenticity. One of the most powerful pillars for generating constructive influence is genuine appreciation. Recognizing others' talents, efforts, and achievements not only strengthens their self-esteem but also positions us as someone who sees and values them. A sincere compliment, a gesture of gratitude, or a word of encouragement can have a profound impact on someone's life. It is not about flattery, but about paying attention and expressing what we genuinely admire. This practice not only uplifts others but also transforms us, cultivating a more generous and appreciative outlook on the world. Another powerful way to influence is through our emotions. Emotions are contagious. A person who radiates calmness, enthusiasm, or empathy has an immediate effect on those around them. That is why taking care of our emotional state is also a way of taking care of the emotional environment we generate. If we enter a space with tension, complaints, or judgment, that spreads. But if we arrive with openness, with serene joy, with a willingness to collaborate, that also spreads. Emotionally intelligent people do not deny their emotions but know how to regulate and channel them so their impact is constructive. The language we use is another key tool of influence. Words can hurt or heal, close or open, divide or unite. A word spoken at the right time can motivate, calm, or illuminate. Those who master the art of positive language, not as a superficial tactic but as a deep expression of a constructive vision, become sources of inspiration. Speaking from possibilities, from realistic hope, not only positions us as social leaders but also transforms collective perception. Our narrative has power, and using it consciously is an act of emotional responsibility. Moreover, positive influence is cultivated in everyday life. It is not about occasional grand gestures but about small actions repeated with intention. A kind gesture, timely advice, selfless help, genuine listening. These actions gradually build an invisible reputation, an emotional image that makes others feel safe and nourished by our presence. And when people feel good around someone, they naturally tend to follow their example. That is how true influence works. Without impositions, without strategies, without the need for explicit recognition. Being a positive influence also means knowing when to step aside, when to give space for others to shine, grow, or take the lead. Sometimes the best way to guide is not to intervene, to trust in the other person's process, and to hold space with silent presence. This requires humility, detachment, and trust that we don't always need to be protagonists to make an impact. Often, the greatest transformation occurs when we simply create a safe environment where others can flourish. In short, positive influence is not a gift reserved for a select few. It is a daily choice. It is the result of how we relate to ourselves and to others. It is the sum of our words, emotions, actions, and silences. Those who cultivate social intelligence don't seek to stand out, they seek to contribute. They don't seek followers, they seek to plant awareness. And that kind of presence transforms because it leaves an imprint on hearts, not just applause. When we choose to become someone who lifts others up, we are exercising the most powerful form of leadership there is, soul leadership. Chapter 9. Social Intelligence at Work. Relationships that propel your career. The workplace is one of the environments where social intelligence becomes most decisive. Beyond technical skills, academic degrees, or a resume, what truly drives a long-term career is the ability to connect, collaborate, and build trust. Work, after all, is a deeply social activity. Every project, every achievement, and every conflict involves a network of human relationships that directly or indirectly influence results. In this context, those who master social intelligence not only progress with greater ease but also build a professional path that is more sustainable, enriching, and ethical. One of the fundamental pillars of this intelligence applied to work is authentic networking. It's not about collecting contacts like trophies or speaking to people only when you need something. It's about building genuine bonds, cultivating relationships based on mutual interest, sincere collaboration, and reciprocal respect. People with social intelligence understand that every professional encounter is an opportunity to contribute, to learn, to listen, and to plant a seed that may flourish in the future. They don't seek to please everyone or adapt themselves to gain approval, but choose to show up as they are, with a clear, trustworthy, and open presence. Authentic networking grows from the quality of the connection, not its immediate usefulness. That's why it requires time, attention, and consistency. It thrives on small but powerful gestures, remembering a personal detail, offering help without expecting anything in return, recommending someone for their talent, sharing valuable information, giving public recognition. These actions build a positive emotional reputation that goes beyond any role or title. Over time, the most significant opportunities, projects, collaborations, promotions, don't come through insistence but through trust. And that trust is built through consistent gestures that make others feel seen, valued, and respected. Another crucial aspect of social intelligence at work is the ability to read organizational politics without falling into toxicity. Every company or institution has dynamics of power, overlapping interests, egos, and strategic silences. Ignoring this reality is naive, but engaging in it through manipulation or conflict is destructive. Socially intelligent people know how to observe without judgment, understand without absorbing, and position themselves without losing integrity. They don't need to engage in alliance games or gossip to have influence because their impact comes from their coherence, professionalism, and ability to build bridges between people or teams. Reading office politics means recognizing who truly has influence, how decisions are made, which topics are sensitive, who needs to feel heard, and which values, spoken or unspoken, govern the internal culture. This fine-tuned reading allows for elegant navigation even in complex environments. For example, knowing when to speak and when to remain silent, when to escalate a problem and when to solve it informally, when to intervene and when to step aside. This social wisdom not only prevents unnecessary conflicts but also positions you as someone trustworthy and strategic, capable of contributing without stirring up turmoil. To achieve this, it's essential to develop contextual listening. This means not only hearing what is said in meetings but also noticing what is implied in hallways, in gestures, in absences. It's about listening to the emotional climate of the team, detecting unresolved tensions, or noticing when someone needs support. This sensitivity allows you to act before problems grow and to foster a more human and effective work environment. People with high social intelligence detect invisible patterns and use them not for personal gain but to improve workplace harmony, prevent conflicts, and enhance collaboration. Another key skill in this context is diplomacy, the ability to say uncomfortable truths without hurting, express disagreements without confrontation, and defend ideas without imposing them. Social diplomacy is not hypocrisy. It's a mature way of communicating that prioritizes relationships without giving up authenticity. It involves choosing words mindfully, adapting the message to the receiver, reading the emotional timing, and taking responsibility for the impact generated. In the workplace, this skill can be the difference between an escalating conflict and a constructive solution, between a fractured team and a strengthened one. Moreover, social intelligence shows up in how one manages their own ego at work. People who need to shine at all costs, who can't tolerate others' success, or who react from constant competition often create tense and defensive environments. On the other hand, those with healthy self-esteem who recognize others' value foster an atmosphere of shared growth. Celebrating others' achievements, stepping aside when appropriate, and sharing credit rather than monopolizing it are gestures that not only solidify strong professional relationships but also elevate general perceptions of personal leadership. Social intelligence at work is also reflected in relational resilience. The ability to maintain composure and openness even when dealing with difficult people, unfair criticism, or decisions that are hard to understand. Not everything at work will be easy or fair, but those with developed social intelligence know how to respond instead of react. They don't get dragged into drama or frustration but focus on what they can control: their attitude, their communication, their ethics, and their ability to keep adding value. This emotional maturity is the foundation upon which strong careers, lasting relationships, and professional lives with meaningful impact are built. Ultimately, working with social intelligence is not only a way to advance professionally but also a way to dignify the workplace, to humanize daily interactions, and to transform work into a space where you grow not only as a professional but also as a human being. Because true career success lies not only in what you achieve but in how you achieve it, with whom you share it, and who is impacted along the way. And on that path, social intelligence is an irreplaceable compass. Chapter 10. Social Intelligence in Couples and Family. The most intimate relationships, such as those with a partner or family, are where social intelligence is truly put to the test. In these settings, there are no prolonged masks, no room for appearances, and any lack of emotional attention is amplified. In this context, effective communication and emotional validation become the most powerful tools for maintaining healthy, close, and lasting bonds. Unlike professional or surface-level relationships, in family life the impact of our words, silences, gestures, and reactions is much deeper, constant, and significant. That's why those who develop strong social intelligence have a tremendous advantage in creating an emotionally safe home where every member feels seen, valued, and understood. Effective communication is not just about saying nice things or avoiding arguments. It's a way of speaking rooted in respect, affection, and the sincere desire for connection. It is the ability to say, "This hurts me," without blaming, or "I love you," without needing a special occasion. It's learning to express needs without imposing them, to listen without interrupting, to say what we feel without hurting the other person. In family relationships, this way of communicating builds bridges of understanding even in conflict, because the intention is not to win an argument but to protect the bond. Emotional validation, on the other hand, is one of the most transformative gestures in any intimate relationship. To validate does not mean to agree. It means to sincerely recognize what the other person feels as legitimate. It's saying, "I understand that this upset you. I can see why you feel that way. It makes sense that this makes you sad." When someone feels validated, they calm down, open up, and feel safe. On the other hand, when their emotions are minimized, judged, or ignored, they defend themselves, distance themselves, or react with hostility. In this case, social intelligence acts like a bomb. It reduces tension, allows for dialogue, and turns the home into a space where emotions can flow without fear of judgment or rejection. Many of the most common conflicts in couples and families do not arise from deep differences, but from failures in how they are communicated. How we say things matters as much as what we say. A need expressed as criticism becomes an attack. A disagreement voiced with contempt becomes a wound. But when we learn to speak from "I feel," from vulnerability rather than blame, misunderstandings decrease and emotional connection strengthens. Phrases like, "When you come home late without letting me know," "I feel ignored," or "I need more emotional support these days," are very different from "You always do this," or "You're never there for me." Social intelligence allows this shift in focus, from reproach to dialogue, from judgment to understanding. In romantic relationships especially, social intelligence becomes an essential resource for navigating the natural ups and downs of living together. Knowing when to talk and when to listen. Knowing when the other person needs space and when they need presence. Detecting the nonverbal language of fatigue, anger, or the desire for closeness. All this requires constant emotional attention, a subtle reading of the other person that goes beyond words. It's not about guessing but about being available, present, and willing to understand without needing everything to be explained. This level of sensitivity is what distinguishes a functional relationship from a deeply connected one. In the family environment, especially with children, parents, or siblings, social intelligence also serves as a guide to maintaining respect and harmony even when there are generational differences, different values, or unresolved tensions. Many times, families hurt each other unintentionally because they don't know how to dialogue without causing harm. Here, the simple act of listening without interrupting, not reacting defensively to criticism, or showing gratitude instead of demanding can turn a moment of tension into an opportunity for closeness. It's not about avoiding conflict at all costs, but about facing it with humanity, empathy, and a willingness to understand before trying to be right. A key aspect of family relationships is also the management of expectations. Many disappointments stem from wanting the other person to be different, to listen more, to talk more, to change who they are. But social intelligence teaches that accepting others with their limitations, without giving up expressing our own needs, is the foundation of mutual respect. Sometimes that acceptance includes learning to negotiate healthy boundaries, to say no with love, to bring order without imposing it. All this is part of mature coexistence, where everyone has space without needing to overpower the other. It's also important to remember that social intelligence in couples and families is not static. It's a continuous learning process. Life stages change dynamics. Births, losses, moves, illnesses, retirement, children's adolescence. Every transition demands new ways of understanding, new agreements, new languages. That's why openness to ongoing dialogue is essential. Asking how the other feels, revisiting unspoken rules, acknowledging our own mistakes without justifying them, expressing gratitude for what is taken for granted. These gestures, repeated often, create a positive emotional climate that protects the relationship against inevitable storms. Ultimately, social intelligence in intimate relationships is not about cold techniques, but about cultivating a way of being with others that honors their humanity. It's about stopping seeing differences as threats and starting to see them as doors to deeper understanding. Stopping reacting from defensiveness and starting to respond from love. Because in the end, what builds a lasting couple or a united family is not the absence of conflict but the presence of understanding. And that understanding is trained, chosen, and practiced every day, with every word, every silence, every gesture. Chapter 11. Detecting Toxic and Manipulative People. On the journey of social intelligence, learning to identify and manage toxic and manipulative relationships is a crucial step in preserving our emotional well-being and maintaining a healthy environment. Toxic people not only drain our energy but can also undermine our confidence, sabotage our achievements, and create chaos in our lives, often without us fully understanding how or why. That's why developing a social radar that detects early warning signs and strengthens our boundaries is an essential skill for navigating the world with greater safety and balance. The warning signs of a toxic or manipulative person can be subtle at first, but with conscious attention, they become evident. One of the first clues is often the inconsistency between what they say and what they do. Broken promises, frequent contradictions, empty words that never translate into actions. These types of people may use ambiguity to maintain control and confusion, creating insecurity in those around them. Another indicator is the constant pattern of victimhood, where the person always presents themselves as unfairly treated, unable to take responsibility, and blaming others for their problems. Another common sign is the tendency to manipulate others' emotions for personal gain. This can manifest as guilt disguised as concern, excessive flattery followed by implicit demands, or emotional outbursts that induce guilt and make setting boundaries difficult. Manipulation is not always overt or aggressive. It is often subtle and disguised as affection or care. Learning to recognize these strategies requires observing how we feel after interacting with that person. Do we feel drained, anxious, insecure, or guilty for no clear reason? These internal sensations are powerful indicators that social intelligence must learn to listen to. Excessive control is another hallmark of toxic individuals. They may try to make decisions for others, belittle opposing opinions, or impose their ideas under the guise of caring or protection. This control affects autonomy and personal freedom and is often accompanied by constant criticism that undermines self-esteem. Toxic people rarely accept no as an answer and may react with anger, emotional blackmail, or withdrawal of affection to get their way. This dynamic is especially harmful because it undermines the ability to make free decisions and can create emotional dependence. A key characteristic of toxic people is their inability to show genuine empathy. Although they can simulate empathy to achieve their goals, they lack the real capacity or willingness to put themselves in another person's shoes and consider their feelings or needs. This results in a one-sided relationship where their desires and emotions take priority, while those of others are secondary or completely ignored. Social intelligence enables us to identify this lack of reciprocity and recognize that a healthy relationship requires balanced exchange where both parties feel respected and valued. To protect our energy and maintain healthy social boundaries with toxic and manipulative people, it's essential to develop inner strength that doesn't rely on external approval. This involves learning to say no without guilt, stepping away from conversations or situations that harm us, and avoiding unnecessary justifications. In this case, social intelligence acts as a shield that helps maintain emotional balance, preventing manipulations from destabilizing us or dragging us into destructive dynamics. Creating clear and consistent boundaries is an act of self-love and respect for others. These boundaries may include deciding who we want to spend time with and how much, which topics we are willing to discuss and which we prefer to avoid, or which behaviors we refuse to tolerate. Communicating these boundaries assertively, without aggression but with clarity, is a powerful way to preserve our mental and emotional health. Moreover, it helps model for others how we want to be treated, which often leads to greater respect and fewer attempts at manipulation. Sometimes the best way to protect ourselves is simply to distance ourselves. Physically and emotionally distancing from toxic people is not a sign of weakness but of wisdom and self-care. Recognizing when a relationship has become unhealthy and making the conscious decision to create distance is a necessary step to regain inner peace. This distancing can be gradual or definitive, depending on the context, but it should always be respectful and firm, avoiding retaliation or conflicts that only prolong harm. It's also important to strengthen our social circle with people who uplift us, respect us, and support our personal growth. Social intelligence guides us to invest time and energy in relationships that are reciprocal, authentic, and constructive. Surrounding ourselves with positive support not only reduces the impact of toxic people but also provides healthy models of interaction, communication, and affection that we can replicate and adapt in other areas of our lives. Finally, self-awareness is a key tool in dealing with manipulative people. Understanding our own vulnerabilities, insecurities, and emotional patterns allows us to detect when someone is trying to exploit them. Social intelligence is not only about understanding others but also about paying attention to ourselves, how we react, what emotions are triggered, and why. This level of awareness gives us the power to choose more clearly and act with greater freedom, avoiding emotional traps or harmful relationships. Detecting toxic and manipulative people is a fundamental aspect of social intelligence that protects our emotional health and promotes healthier relationships. Learning to recognize warning signs, strengthen our boundaries, say no with respect, and distance ourselves when necessary are practices that allow us to keep our vital energy intact and build a more authentic and fulfilling social life. Social intelligence, in this sense, is a guide to living with greater safety, autonomy, and well-being, consciously choosing which people we want by our side and how we want to relate to them. Chapter 12. Social Adaptability. How to read and adjust to different environments. Social adaptability is one of the most valuable and least recognized skills within the broad spectrum of social intelligence. We live in a diverse world, full of varied contexts and ever-changing environments, where the implicit rules that govern interaction can be radically different. What works in a circle of friends may not necessarily be appropriate in a formal work environment, and what is acceptable in one culture may be inappropriate in another. Knowing how to read these differences, understand the prevailing social code in each situation, and adjust naturally is a hallmark of high social intelligence that opens doors and fosters genuine connections. The social code is that set of unwritten rules that determines how we should behave, what language to use, which topics are appropriate and which are better avoided, how to express emotions, and even what degree of informality is acceptable. This code varies not only between cultures, but also between generations, professional groups, social classes, and even personal circles. For example, at a corporate event, communication is usually formal, respectful, and strongly focused on professional objectives, whereas at a family gathering, spontaneity, emotional expression, and frequent jokes may be the norm. Adapting to these codes requires observation, sensitivity, and mental flexibility. The first technique to avoid standing out awkwardly and to connect quickly in different environments is active observation. Before rushing to speak or act, it is essential to watch and listen carefully to how others behave. What kind of language do they use? How do they greet one another? What topics dominate the conversation? What tone and volume of voice are considered appropriate? This observation gives us valuable clues to calibrate our own behavior and avoid making mistakes that could generate rejection or discomfort. In many cases, the ability to make this quick and accurate reading distinguishes those who adapt well from those who seem out of place. A second technique is gradual adjustment. This is not about completely changing our essence or personality, but about modulating certain aspects to fit the context. For example, we may be spontaneous and playful in private, but in a professional environment, we might opt for more measured and respectful language. We can choose discussion topics based on the group's interests, avoiding overly personal subjects during formal meetings. This adjustment does not imply falseness, but rather intelligence in managing the image we project and the way we want to be perceived, always respecting our integrity and values. Mastery of body language is another fundamental aspect of social adaptability. Every culture and social group has its own codes for expressing emotions and attitudes through the body. A simple gesture such as a handshake can vary in duration, firmness, and meaning. Eye contact may be a sign of respect in some places and a sign of challenge in others. Learning to modulate our posture, facial expressions, and movements to align with the environment is a powerful way to quickly generate trust and empathy. This control of body language acts as a non-verbal complement that reinforces the message we want to convey. Active listening, which we explored in previous chapters, plays an essential role here. When adapting to different environments, listening carefully not only to what is said but also to how it is said and what is left unsaid allows us to capture important nuances that guide our behavior. In some contexts, it may be wise to listen more and speak less, observing dynamics before intervening. In others, showing verbal interest and asking open-ended questions fosters connection and a climate of trust. This flexibility in how we listen and respond demonstrates respect for the group and increases our chances of successful integration. Additionally, social adaptability involves managing our emotions and remaining calm in uncomfortable or unexpected situations. When we find ourselves in unfamiliar environments or among norms that feel strange, it is common to feel anxious or insecure. However, social intelligence invites us to transform those emotions into curiosity and openness. Instead of resisting what is different, we can view it as an opportunity to learn, grow, and expand our social repertoire. This positive attitude not only improves our experience but also projects confidence and makes it easier for others to accept us. In some cases, social adaptability also requires the ability to use humor appropriately. Humor is a powerful social bridge but also a delicate one, as what is funny to some may be offensive to others. Understanding what types of jokes are acceptable, when is the right time to make them, and when it's better to refrain is part of the social code we need to learn to read. Using humor with sensitivity and respect helps create a relaxed and pleasant atmosphere, strengthening social bonds without generating conflict. It is important to emphasize that social adaptability does not mean giving up our authenticity or values. It is about striking a balance between staying true to ourselves and being flexible enough to fit into different contexts. When we achieve this balance, we not only feel more comfortable and confident but also project a coherent and appealing image that facilitates the creation of genuine relationships. Social intelligence, in this sense, works like the art of harmony, where each interaction is an opportunity to tune in with the environment without losing our essence. Consistent practice is the key to improving this skill. The more we expose ourselves to different groups and situations, the easier it becomes to identify patterns and adapt quickly. Traveling, attending various social events, and getting involved in new activities are effective ways to exercise social adaptability. It is also helpful to reflect after each experience. What worked? What didn't? What could we do differently next time? This self-assessment allows us to adjust our behavior and expand our capacity for connection. Technology and social media have created new scenarios where social adaptability is equally important. Although digital communication has its own codes, respect, empathy, and the ability to read emotions through written messages or video calls remain vital. Adapting to these new environments requires developing specific skills, such as interpreting tone in text or managing the image we project online. Social intelligence thus extends beyond in-person interactions, encompassing all spaces where we connect. In short, social adaptability is a skill that opens doors, reduces conflicts, and fosters authentic connections in a complex and diverse world. Learning to read the social code of each context, observing carefully, modulating our behavior, and managing our emotions allow us not only to fit in better but also to build richer and more meaningful relationships. Social intelligence teaches us that flexibility is not weakness but a sign of strength and wisdom for living in harmony with others. Chapter 13. Training your social intelligence day by day. Training social intelligence is a continuous process that develops day by day through exercises, habits, and conscious practices that allow us to improve our ability to read, understand, and connect with people. Unlike other skills that can be learned and then neglected, social intelligence requires constant commitment because the social world is dynamic and ever-changing, and our relationships are in constant evolution. Cultivating this skill is an investment that brings profound and lasting benefits to all areas of life. A fundamental practice for strengthening social intelligence is deliberate observation. This means dedicating specific moments to observing without intervening, paying attention not only to what is said but also to how it is said, what emotions are expressed through body language, and how people react to different stimuli. For example, in a social or work meeting, we can focus our attention on micro-expressions, gestures, postures, and group dynamics. This active observation trains us to capture details that often go unnoticed, increasing our social sensitivity. Another key habit is the conscious practice of active listening. This involves fully focusing on the person speaking, without interrupting, without mentally planning a response while they speak, and showing genuine interest through open-ended questions, nods, and facial expressions that encourage further conversation. Incorporating this habit into our daily conversations helps create a safe space for others to express themselves, increasing trust and improving the quality of interactions. Likewise, exercising empathy is essential for social training. This is not only achieved by understanding others' emotions, but also by actively exploring how we can put ourselves in someone else's shoes, imagining their experiences, and validating their feelings without judgment. One practical way to do this is to mentally review recent social situations and ask ourselves, how might that person have felt? What motivations could they have had? This exercise strengthens cognitive and emotional empathy, facilitating more appropriate and compassionate responses in future interactions. Emotional self-regulation is another pillar of social training. Often, our emotions can interfere with our relationships, either because we react impulsively or because we fail to express what we truly feel. Practicing breathing techniques, mindfulness, and reflective pauses allows us to stay calm and clear in moments of tension or conflict. Incorporating these practices into our daily routine not only improves our emotional intelligence, but also makes our interactions more constructive and balanced. It is also beneficial to develop the habit of reflecting on each social experience. At the end of the day or after important events, dedicating a few minutes to evaluate what went well, what was challenging, and what could be improved is a powerful way to learn. This conscious reflection helps us identify patterns, correct mistakes, and consolidate lessons, turning every experience into an opportunity for social growth. Additionally, it is very useful to set specific and realistic goals related to social intelligence. For example, setting a goal to initiate one new conversation each week, practice active listening in family meetings, or handle criticism at work more effectively. These goals motivate us and give us a clear direction for training our skills. Measuring progress is not always easy, but we can use indicators such as how easily we start conversations, the quality of our relationships, how often we feel genuine connection, and our ability to resolve conflicts without tension. Daily training can also include gradual exposure to varied and challenging social situations. Stepping out of our comfort zone, attending events where we don't know many people, or participating in groups with interests different from our own are exercises that help us develop adaptability and confidence. Through these experiences, we learn to manage social uncertainty and apply our skills in real contexts, which accelerates our growth. Another powerful strategy is to seek honest feedback from trusted people. Asking friends, family, or colleagues for their opinion about how we communicate, how we relate to others, or what we could improve is a valuable source of external information that complements our self-assessment. This feedback, though sometimes uncomfortable, is essential to having a complete view of our social intelligence and consciously adjusting our behavior. Incorporating readings, workshops, or courses related to social intelligence is also a recommended practice to deepen our understanding of the topic. Learning about theory, techniques, and practical cases provides conceptual tools and applicable strategies. However, it is essential to complement this knowledge with constant practice in daily life because social intelligence is primarily practical and experiential. In today's world, social intelligence is also trained in digital spaces. Interactions on social networks, video calls, and written messages have their own rules and codes that we need to learn to avoid misunderstandings and strengthen relationships. Practicing digital empathy, knowing how to express emotions appropriately, and respecting others' space in these mediums are part of modern social training. It is important to recognize that progress in social intelligence can be gradual and sometimes seem slow. There will be moments when we feel stuck or when certain skills seem particularly difficult to master. The key is perseverance and maintaining an open and positive attitude toward learning. Every small step adds up and contributes to sustained improvement that will be reflected in our quality of life and relationships. Ultimately, training social intelligence day by day is a commitment to ourselves to live with greater connection, authenticity, and well-being. It is a path that leads us to better understand others and ourselves, communicate effectively, and build meaningful relationships that support us in all areas of life. Constant practice, conscious reflection, and openness to change are the ingredients that will make this skill a natural and powerful part of who we are. In this way, social intelligence becomes an essential tool to navigate the modern world with success, empathy, and joy. Conclusion: your new reality with high social intelligence. As we wrap up this journey through social intelligence, it's important to remember how valuable it is to truly understand and connect with people. Social intelligence is not just about knowing things, but about knowing how to relate authentically and effectively. This improves our relationships, our work, and our overall well-being. We've seen how our brain is wired to connect, how to read emotions and body language, and how to truly listen to others. We also learned how to manage our emotions, handle difficult conversations, build genuine relationships, and protect ourselves from toxic people. All of this helps us become better in life, both personally and professionally. Having social intelligence transforms life in the long run. It makes us happier, more successful, and more capable of handling challenges calmly. It helps us build support networks and become better friends, partners, and leaders. Moreover, it fosters a kinder and more collaborative world. This new way of connecting requires constant practice and a genuine desire to learn. But by doing so, we transform our own lives and the lives of those around us. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to grow and truly connect. In summary, social intelligence is the key to a fuller life with stronger relationships. May this audiobook be the starting point for that change, so that every encounter with others becomes an opportunity to connect, learn, and move forward together. That way, success and happiness will not just be goals but a natural part of our everyday lives. So, if this audiobook inspired you and you're ready to continue deepening your personal growth and inner transformation, I invite you to discover another revealing audiobook that will change the way you see the world, your decisions, and your potential. Click, and I'll see you there.